Shalom, family. I have a scripture passage that I'm going to read for some of you brothers who came on my last video, and you're trying to justify yet again marrying white women, right? It seems like every time I put a video up where I'm talking about this particular thing, where so-called black men will just come out of the woodworks defending their position and trying to make it seem like, oh no, it wasn't because of anything else other than the fact that they would turn your hearts away from Yah. Other than that, the Most High don't care. No, that is not true. There are tons of scripture to support the fact that the Most High says, no, don't do it. It is an abomination. As a matter of fact, read the book of Jubilee, chapter 30, the whole chapter. The Most High tells you why. He says he don't want the seed defiled. He also says that it is an abomination. He didn't say nothing about other gods. You see, and so our brothers want to make it about that, and then you have some sisters who, because of lack of understanding, they believe that too. So I'm going to set the record straight here, okay? Read Jubilee, the 30th chapter, the whole thing. The Most High tells you because it's an abomination. It's not just because of serving of false gods and all that kind of stuff. It goes beyond that. But the passage I'm going to read is in Deuteronomy, the 21st chapter, verses 10 through 14. This is one of those passages that a lot of brothers are using to say that they can marry strange women. Okay? I'm going to set the record straight on this. It's kind of funny how these brothers, they always like to start their comments off by saying, see, this is why women shouldn't be teaching. Well, let me tell you something. The scripture never said, the law, I'm going to say the law, never said that women could not teach. It never said anything of the sort. You all have taken scriptures out of context because you have an agenda. Paul, the one who you quote as saying that women shouldn't be teach, it was talking about having authority over her husband or usurping her husband. It was also talking about the hierarchy within the home, okay? Paul, the same guy that you like to quote, if you go a few books or chapters over, should I say, he goes on to say that greet these women that are fellow laborers in the gospel, which we know as the good news, not the gospel. He says, greet them who are fellow laborers in spreading the good news. But see, you brothers don't want to talk about that one. You don't want to deal with that scripture. You don't want to deal with the scripture that talks about the sister who was in Jerusalem expounding to the people about the Most High. All that looked for redemption in Jerusalem came to hear her speak in the temple. We don't want to talk about her though, because it don't fit the narrative that these brothers are putting out. But anyway, let me move on to the scripture that some of you are trying to use to justify having sexual intercourse and marriage with strange women, despite the fact that the Most High, Yah, said in his laws, do not do it. Okay, starting at verse 10 of Deuteronomy, chapter 21. And I'm going to read on through 14. It says, when thou goest forth to war against thine enemies, and Yah thy Elohim hath delivered them into thine hands, and thou hast taken them captive, and seest among the captives a beautiful woman, and hast a desire unto her, that thou wouldest have her to thy wife, then thou shalt bring her home to thine house, and she shall shave her head and pare her nails. And she shall be the raiment of her captivity from off her. And she shall put the raiment of her captivity from off her, and shall remain in thine house, and bewail her father and her mother a full month. And after that thou shalt go in unto her, and be her husband, and she shall be thy wife. And it shall be, if thou have no delight in her, then thou shalt let her go, whither she will, but thou shalt not sell her at all for money. Thou shalt not make merchandise of her, because thou hast humbled her. Okay. That says, if you go to war with a people, and you take them as captives, you take them as captives. You take them as captives. So you mean to tell me so-called black men that use the scripture Are you saying that right now we have the upper hand and we have taken all these other nations as captives and they are under our feet and under our authority? Is that what you're saying? Apparently, I don't think you all understand that we are the captives in a foreign land. That these people have taken us as their captives and they have their foot on our neck. Not the other way around. Not the other way around. We are dealing with people who have a perpetual hatred for us. Even some of the women that you take to wife have the upper hand over you. And the reason why I say this, because even if you feel like within your house you have the upper hand, let that woman call the police on you and say, come and get this Negro out of my house. See how fast they converge on your property and do what that woman wants them to do, which is get this Negro out of her house. We have a friend of my husband that actually happened to. So, again, you're looking at this passage. You're reading something into that is simply not true. The scripture talks about if we go to war with an enemy and we take them as captives or slaves, you see. But the exact opposite has happened. We have been taken as captives or slaves, you see. And we are in a foreign land being subjugated by people who hate us. So you can't use this scripture right here to justify your lust and thirst for forbidden waters, for the forbidden waters of the white woman's womb and vagina. You cannot, as a so-called black man, use this as your opportunity to break the laws of the Most High Yah. This is very clear in what it said. But somehow you all have interpreted it to mean something totally different. Very clear in what it said. The Most High did not give you permission to come. It says when you go in among these other nations that we are supposed to separate ourselves from them. Come out from among them and be ye separate. But you all are going about, you're not even trying to pick the best ones. You're picking the fat ones, the ones that are very trashy. You're picking those. I'm telling you, it's ridiculous what I see happening. And I know that many of you can't stand to hear black women talk about these things, especially from a biblical perspective. You can't stand it because it actually rains on your parade. So you get nervous, you get angry, you get upset. You start calling folk out of their name. I don't care. I don't care about that stuff anymore because you're going to do it anyway because you already can't stand the black woman. And so you definitely don't want to hear no black woman who's coming from the Bible telling you that you are wrong for going after these women and trying to use scripture to justify it. Many of you have to you use scripture and say, well, what about Ruth? What about this one? What about that one? What about Joseph and his wife? Well, I tell you what, the law of Moses was not yet given when Joseph had or took his wife. You see, the law was not yet given. And many of the things that we read about, the law was not yet given, but some of you try to go back before the law was established and use stories of things that happened to try to justify breaking the law now. You see, one good example of that is when I believe it was Reuben slept with one of Jacob's concubines. And there was a question asked later. I think it was in the book of Jubilee. They said, well, what about when Reuben did this, why wasn't he punished for it? Why wasn't it counted as sin for him? And the passage goes on to say not that he wasn't punished because of this, because the law had not yet been given. It hadn't been established yet. So therefore it wasn't imputed to him as sin, only in the eyes of his father. His father saw it as wrong because you took his woman, you see. But the scripture later established, don't use that to say, well, why can't we do it? It talks about using that or trying to use that and saying don't do it because the law wasn't given yet, you see. And so that is a good example of the Most High saying, look, don't reach back and look back at a sin that someone did in biblical times to try to justify doing it today, because I've given you the law now. You are without excuse. You are without excuse. I don't want to hear about what this one did. I don't want to hear about Joseph and what he did, and Ruth. As a matter of fact, if you really do some studying on Ruth, she was not a Moabite. And this could be proven in Scripture. She was the kinfolk of the Israelites. Okay? The tribe of Reuben, I believe, had already overtaken that land. And all of the Moabites were put out of that land. So she only dwelt in the land of Moab. We're going to do a full study on this. Okay? But this is to kind of give some of you something to study. Okay? But we're going to do a full lesson on this. But those who always say, what about Ruth? She was dwelling in the land of Moab. So this is why she was referred to as a Moabitess. Just like they call us African Americans because we live in America. Same thing was going on. Reuben, the tribe of Reuben, had already overtaken that land and put the people out. Something to chew on, okay? But again, for you brothers who like to use Deuteronomy chapter 21 verses 10 through 14 to justify marrying and sleeping with heathen women, gotcha. Okay? Rightly divide the word. Stop trying to justify your sin, okay? I know you all can't stand it, especially coming from a woman. But I want to see our people doing right in the sight of the Most High Yah. And not to continue down this path of disobedience. Because that's what we're doing. We're increasing the sins of Israel. You want to say, what about this scripture? Well, what about all those who tell you point blank, period, it's wrong. Don't do it. It's an abomination. So don't try to justify it in your mind. Don't do it. And with that, I will say shalom to my people.